Today is August 30th, 2023. My name is Rob Carter of Kalamazoo Right to Life, and this is Pro-Life Week. Well, when I started this little podcast about a year and a half to 2 years ago, I announced quite jokingly that it was going to be raw and unedited, unscripted, so to speak. Well, today's program is no exception. Originally, I intended today's program to be just a continuing discussion on what I talked about last time, the connection between abortion and the transgender movement. But something that hit the news this morning that has forced me to shelve the other for a later date. So we're going to plunge into the news that came down late this morning. Does this look familiar? I hope it does. Back on November 8, 2022, Michigan voters approved Proposal 3. So what was Proposal 3? It was a state referendum that would change the Michigan Constitution. It wasn't a traditional referendum, but it was a constitutional change amendment that would legalize abortion through fetal viability and then beyond into the final trimester for reasons of life or health of the mother. Health is always the exceptions. And there were some other provisions, but that was the basic. But when you voted back in November, you go to the church or that school or absentee ballot, and you got your ballot, and there was a 100-word summary of the actual amendment. And the last phrase was quite confusing. It would say it would establish the individual right to reproductive freedom, blah, blah, blah. And then, quote, it would invalidate all, not some, but all state laws that conflict with this amendment, unquote. So what kinds of laws would be invalidated if Proposal 3 was approved? It would invalidate our abortion ban of 1931. It would nullify or invalidate our ban on partial birth abortion. It would invalidate our parental consent law. It would invalidate our informed consent law. It would invalidate our clinic licensing law and several other laws that had been passed by pro-life lawmakers in the last 35 to 40 years that would all be nullified or invalidated by Proposal 3. So why did the pro-abortion people feel the need to push for Proposal 3? Well, you got to go back to June 24th, 2022, when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision and returned the issue to the states. State lawmakers could decide abortion policies. So in conservative states like Oklahoma, you might have a law that may ban abortion from conception. In liberal states like California and New York, maybe Illinois, you could have abortions legal into the final trimester. It just depended on what state you lived in. Well, in Michigan, our abortion ban from 1931 banned abortions through all 9 months of pregnancy. And that law should have taken effect immediately after Dobbs. In several other states that had very pro-life laws, they took effect immediately after Dobbs. Well, ours did not. A judge stepped in and kind of put it up, sort of block on it. Meanwhile, the pro-abortion side had a referendum. They got their signatures to put Proposal 3 on the ballot because they wanted to make sure that abortion was legal and we would never go back to our ban from 1931. They wanted abortion legal in Michigan. And Proposal 3 was the vehicle that got them to that place. So our effort or our campaign was to declare that this proposal was too confusing and too extreme because it would invalidate all these laws I just mentioned. Well, the other side, through deception and misinformation or disinformation, they confused and deceived the voters into accepting Proposal 3 overwhelmingly, I would say, unfortunately, overwhelmingly. So that, and we were outspent 2 or 3 to 1 by being outspent by all these millionaires throwing millions of dollars into their pro-abortion campaign coming from New York and California and other places. They'd outspent us so much that voters were just misled. So we're stuck with this thing. And now I'm going to be reading now from this pro-life website, because it says today, when I mean today, I mean Wednesday, today, August 30th, Barbara Listing, president of Right to Life of Michigan, responded to Governor Whitmer's anti-life fall policy priorities. The governor's stated objectives included the passage of the Reproductive Health Act, which would include the repeal of long-standing health regulations and safety standards for abortion clinics, including the repeal of laws that require licensing and inspection, the removal of informed consent, and the 24-hour waiting period to review consent documents for an abortion, and the removal of restrictions on taxpayer funding for abortion. It would also include possibly the removal of parental consent for a minor child seeking an abortion that had been included in a previous version of this Reproductive Health Act. So let's kind of break these down. If passed, now remember, after the midterm elections, we lost our pro-life majorities in both House and Senate in Lansing. So if they vote party line, and if this thing passes and the governor signs it, these things become law and invalidate all the pro-life laws that we have enacted in the last 35 to 40 years. They would all be gone. So let's take a look at some of these things. It would repeal long-standing health regulations and safety standards for abortion clinics. Clinics need to be inspected, and like a freestanding healthcare clinic, you have to have certain standards, and these regulations will no longer include abortion clinics like any other health clinic. They'd be in a separate category. You wouldn't need inspections for maybe 10, 15, 20 years. It would also repeal laws that require licensing and inspections. Now, on these licensing, this is one of the things that we talked about being confusing and extreme. We were concerned, and part of our campaign made these points. We were concerned that if Prop 3 passed, it would eliminate the requirement that a MD, a licensed physician, perform the abortion. That maybe it might be allow a physician's assistant, a PA, or a midwife, or an RN would be allowed to do the abortion, not just a physician. It's too confusing. It's all up in the air. They're going to get rid of the licensing and inspection requirement. It would remove informed consent. Now, back in 1986, so it's a long time ago, there was a Supreme Court case called Thornburg versus American College of OB-GYNs. And in this decision, the Supreme Court majority, at that time, it since would change, but at that time, ruled that informed consent was unconstitutional. And Chief Justice at that time, Warren Burger, voted pro-life with the minority, and he argued that, basically, in what other medical procedure or operation could a physician not tell the patient what he's going to do and what the risks are for that operation? And he said, and if the doctor didn't tell the patient, that person had grounds for a malpractice lawsuit because the doctor didn't tell her what the procedure was. But somehow in abortion, it was a different category, which is ridiculous. So let me keep going. 24-hour waiting period would be eliminated. Some women might need a day to think about that decision, and maybe in that day, maybe she comes to the realization that maybe there's another option. Maybe she's not going to terminate that pregnancy. Maybe God has been speaking to her heart and she's reconsidered and she doesn't keep the appointment and she chooses to save her baby and maybe put it up for adoption or whatever. But she needed that 24-hour period to think about that decision. It's a life-changing decision that should not be made kind of casually or on the spur of the moment. That would be gone. Taxpayer funding for abortions. We've had that since 1988. Taxpayers do not want to pay for abortions for poor women out of their tax dollars. They don't want to do it. And then parental consent. Parents would be removed from the discussion and the child makes the decision on her own. Now, a poll was taken recently that shows that Michiganders who voted in favor of Prop 3, these are pro-abortion, pro-choice voters at some level of that spectrum. Of those who voted for Proposal 3, 97% support clinic health and safety standards. 65% support a 24-hour waiting period. And 60% support parental consent. These are majority votes or positions that are common sense regulations. And I think back to last fall during the campaign for governor when Gretchen Whitmer debated Tudor Dixon, who was the GOP gubernatorial candidate. And the discussion of Prop 3 came up, and in particular, parental consent. And at that time, during that debate, Gretchen Whitmer looked in the camera and she lied through her teeth and she said, if Proposal 3 passes, parental consent is not going to be included in one of those laws that will be invalidated. It's not on the table. Well, we see here that it's back on the table. And it was always in there in the pro-abortion agenda to get rid of parental consent, along with the other things we listed here. So, that was how they won. They won by deceiving the voters. And now that they got the vote they need, now they're going to ram through their pro-abortion agenda that we campaigned against. And we warned the voters, don't pass this referendum. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because it's too confusing and too extreme. But the other side, they had the money to outspend us on TV commercials and radio ads and pop-up ads on your phone and billboards and yard signs and material. We could not match them dollar for dollar. And the voters were deceived. And now we're reaping the whirlwind. Now it's true, God is on the throne. God contains the heart of the king or the lawmaker. And, I remember there was an Illinois senator from years ago, Republican Everett Dirksen, who once said, when I feel the heat, I see the light. Well, if enough people remind these voters, hey, 97% want clinic licensing, 65% want waiting periods, 60% want parental consent. We want these things to remain laws in the state of Michigan. If you vote against them, we're going to vote against you. And maybe they won't vote pro-abortion. Maybe they'll either not vote or vote pro-life. We'll see. God is still on the throne. With that, I'll let you go now. See you next time.